Hello and welcome to the Beta Project. In each episode we take an unreleased Nintendo 64 beta prototype or mod and find out more about its history and the game's story. Then, unlike other shows, what we're going to be doing with the thanks of the EverDrive 64 is actually playing it on the real hardware. In this episode we're going to be taking a look at one of the most promising cancelled games, WildWaters Extreme Kayak. WildWaters, which was also known as Extreme Kayak, was an arcade-style racing game which was in development by Looking Glass Studios for the Nintendo 64. The project itself was announced at E3 in 1999 by Ubisoft, who were interested in being the publisher for the game. Now, the game was never shown live on the exhibition floor, it was only shown behind the scenes because it was in early development, and this was to give the opportunity for media and press outlets to gather some interest in the game. The actual developers themselves were able to create a real-time running water effect for the rivers, and I think given more time they would have been able to get this to look even better than the water effects that we'd seen in Wave Race 64. Not only this, the studio promised there would be 5 different game modes, including multiplayer, and the game would also take use of the expansion pack and Rumble Pack. So how did this game go from being so promising to being cancelled? Well, around 1999, the publisher Eidos Interactive, who were the current publisher for Looking Glass Studios games, they ran into financial difficulties which resulted in the plug being pulled. Then 12 years passed without anybody seeing the game or hearing anything more about it. This of course was until the 18th of January 2012 when this happened. A prototype car appeared on eBay and instantly attracted the Nintendo 64 collector community who were desperate to get their hands on this game. When the auction closed 10 days later, the game had attracted a huge bid of $1,600 US, which is the highest price ever paid for a Nintendo 64 prototype at the time. Then a few months after this sale had taken place, the ROM was dumped and released to the gaming community for everybody to play the game, which is exactly what I'm going to do now. So I'm just going to load up WildWater from my EverDrive, which only takes a few moments due to the small file size. As you can see, the title screens were not in place here, however both the multiplayer and the single player mode are available. Although 2 courses are shown here, only Devil's Elbow is actually playable. Next you select your character and all 3 shown here are actually playable in this version of the game. The first thing that you'll notice is the water effect is fantastic. You've got to remember this is a very early version of the game, however you can tell right away that they had put a lot of work into getting the physics in the game right. If you go off the edge of a ledge, then your character will bop under the water and take a moment to resurface. If you hit a rock or the sides of your track, your character will slow down and it will take a few moments for you to regain momentum. The characters at this stage all appear to have similar attributes, so it's not clear if in the final version of the game character selection would play a role in how you attempted each course. The character models are very nice, and if you notice the body makes slight movements during the race, which I'm sure they would have expanded on more as they develop the game further. Now the control in the game is very good. The character and kayak feel very responsive with the analog stick, and you push this forward to paddle. When I watch this footage back, I can't help but think that maybe using the D-pad and the left and right shoulder buttons to correspond to each arm would have been an optional control method. Whilst I do think some of the textures we're seeing here are final, they still look quite good, if sometimes a little jerky and jagged. There are however many placeholder textures here which are very low res, and I assume this is firstly to speed up the development of the game, but also to help with the frame rate during this beta version. Now this section here I'm certain would have been a checkpoint, as it's around halfway down the track and the sides appear to be where sponsorship logos may have gone in the final build. What I would have loved to have seen is what the final damage physics would have been in the final build of the game. With this version you can literally just push your boat as hard as you want it to go without any ramifications or any problems in doing this. I think in the final build of the game they would have had to have incorporated some form of damage build-up meter into the game. I also really like the music on this course and I think it fits the game very well. It's very melodic and relaxing, and I think it works well in contrast to the frantic paddling. I would have liked to have heard the music on the other courses to know if this was the style they were going for, or perhaps if they had a more dynamic soundtrack which would get harder when you were tackling different stages of the course. My theory is that in the easier parts of the course it should sound like this, but in the more difficult levels when you're facing white water sections it should pick up to a higher tempo. There's not much in terms of sound effects in this build, so I can't really comment on them. Now as we get to the bottom of the track, the course ends, and this is also the end of the game. So there you have it, that was Extreme Kayak. Now you may think that this is the end of the story, however both Assembler Games and NESworld.com have actually managed to speak to staff who were working on the game, so let's take a look at what they had to say about the project. My recollection of the project was that it was somewhere between alpha and beta. It was definitely playable and quite fun to play, but there was a limited amount of content. Although we had weekly management teleconferences where we went over the status of each project from every office, I don't really recall too much of the development process of the game itself. And here's what another team member had to say. I didn't think anyone remembered that game. I was involved in WildWaters design, yes. The final character designs were done by me. I was fairly fortunate on this too, as the art director decided to quit abruptly 2 weeks after I came on full time. That left the art department rather screwed, as WildWaters was still in the design phase at the time. The game didn't even have a title yet, much less any characters outside the basic mesh and poly models. The characters in WildWaters were the product of myself being allowed to be as diverse as I wanted, within reason, without any restrictions from an art director since, well, we didn't have one. Funny thing is that they never replaced him after he left either. I remember looking a lot at Miyamoto references when I did the characters for WildWaters, especially in terms of colours. Colours I thought would be the most important aspect to the game because, well, The N64 wasn't the best system for displaying nice, crisp graphics at the time, and even back then I knew that. Luckily, I did manage to keep just about all of the files I had at the time for the WildWaters characters, although I did lose a lot of the screenshots that I had due to poor hard drive backup practices. In the pics that you can find online, the character seen is Katana. I didn't make up any of the names. A Japanese girl with black and orange hair. I do know that David Sears did manage to squeak a copy of the what was finished at the time game out of the office on one of the N64 flash ROMs after the doors to the Redmond site closed. I myself was tempted, as it would have been easy to do so, and it was somewhat chaotic in those final months, but the fear of legal retribution kept me from doing so, and the fact that each one of those flash ROM carts cost the company somewhere between $300 to $500 to rent from Nintendo. I'd say all in all the game was about 75 to 85% complete and had just about to be bug tested at base level by QA. So there you have it, that's WildWaters, also known as Extreme Kayak. So what do you think about this game? By the looks of it, do you think the Nintendo 64 missed out on a real great game, or do you think it was best left as being an unreleased prototype? Let me know in the comments below, and I'd love to have a discussion with any of you that want to talk a little bit more about the game. Please, if you would do, hit that like button so we can help reach a wider audience, and until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll be back soon with another episode and another fantastic game.